the reason why I don't like her. There's nothing to like about a woman who chooses to be destructive.
7th July 2005 was a fine, sunny day in London, England. It seemed pretty normal until something happened, and this day is now remembered as one of the terrifying days in the history of London. This was the day when 4 suicide bombers decided to target people commuting on London's public transport. One survivor recalled the day. He was using the public commute like usual, and then there was a blast. 25 people died in his carriage. Jermaine Lindsay was one of the men who carried out these suicide terror attacks. After his identification, further investigation was carried out, and the investigators came to know that he had a wife and a son. His wife was a British citizen named Samantha Lewthwaite, and from that day, she was infamously known as the White Widow. The journalist Jamie Pyatt, who interviewed her, described that after the 7/7 attack, she was under immense pressure from authorities, her friends, and basically from everywhere. He interviewed her at the Manor Palace. He was expecting her with other journalists, and when she came, she covered her face with a hijab and had a newborn baby in her arms. She uncovered her face and let herself be photographed. Being a white converted wife of an Islamic terrorist, she got a lot of attention. But very cleverly, she painted herself as the victim as well. She played as if she didn't know a thing as to what her husband was planning. She pretended to be in denial, and her act was successful. At that time, everyone considered her a naive white converted woman and no threat whatsoever. She met Jermaine Lindsay in a stop war march. The march was to stop British and US intervention in Iraq, and this factor was also the basis of the 7/7 bombings. So the strings did connect, but everybody turned a blind eye to it. Why? Her story and narrative were quite believable. She was intensely interviewed, yet she managed to save herself. David Vedechet, a former Scotland Yard detective, explained that some points raised suspicion about her, like she never informed authorities when her husband went missing days before the blast. Why wasn't she worried, given that she was 7 months pregnant at that time? She also named her newborn Shahid, which means a martyr. She was supposed to be disturbed by that very word after what her husband did, not naming her child Shahid. David pressed everyone to put her on a suspect list, but the senior investigating officers found no further evidence against her, and she was left free to carry out her monstrous plans. After the interview, Samantha went off the radar only to appear 6 years later. In December 2011, in Mombasa, Kenya, Martin Otieno, head of anti-terrorist police, got information from their intelligence services that an attack was being planned in Mombasa. They tracked the houses, and when they searched them, they found explosive-making chemicals and components. Upon further investigation, it was found that the house belonged to a U.S. citizen named Jermaine John Grant. They carried out an operation against him and were successful. In one of the police interviews, Jermaine confessed that Samantha was the big fish, a mastermind and financier of many terror attacks. Mike Flans, the former Daily Telegraph correspondent, explained that the explosive materials found in the Mombasa terror cell were the same her husband used in the 7/7 attack. Before getting arrested, John Grant gave a heads up to Samantha in code about the authorities' investigation. In one of the searches, the authorities found a white woman in one of the houses. The woman was wearing a Muslim veil, and upon seeing her ID, they came to know that her name was Natalie Faye Webb. The ID card seemed genuine. Her passport had the same information, which was not a false document. During the interrogation, she kept her body language calm. The officers left her place. Then, on a further intelligence investigation, they came to know that Natalie Faye Webb was a fake name. So they went again, but she wasn't there. She fled from there. However, they did find her UK birth certificate and some other documents inside her house. One of the documents had an address of another place, a villa near the tourist beach spot called Shanzu. There, the authorities found sacks of cash, fake passports, and ammunition. Her plot was to hit hotels near the beach during the high season, Christmas. Former UN investigator Matthew Braden explains that Kenya has been a hub of Islamic extremist networks since the early 1990s. She chose to go to Kenya because 1. Kenya is an English-speaking country that avoids the language barrier, and 2. She didn't need a visa to travel there. 6 months after fleeing from that house, she resurfaced, and this time her plan was successful. She attacked the Jericho Bar. This bar was popular among profile people. One of the eyewitnesses of the attack described that he was amazed to see a white woman in hijab in the bar. Then suddenly, there was a blast in the bar. Not one, but 2 of 3 witnesses saw her and identified her picture. This was the last concrete identification of her anywhere. Patrick Mercer, a former UK colonel, discussed why personality had absorbed so much violence. She, from her birth, had been living in terrifying conditions. Her father was a British soldier deployed in Northern Ireland, where he met an Irish girl and Samantha was born. Her father had been fighting terrorists for years, and she had been living in such extreme conditions. In Kenya, Mombasa, the intelligence services found a laptop that has so much important information about Samantha. They also found her journal, where she had written her Islamic extremist literature and a poem dedicated to Osama bin Laden. She was also photographed with her husband, Abdul Wahid, former Kenyan military personnel. He left the military to join Al-Shabaab, a terrorist organization. This network made allegiances with Al-Qaeda in 2012. Since then, they had been involved in all sorts of terrorist activities like suicide bombings, assassinations, car bombings, etc. And Samantha had become their key foreign member. In her journal, Samantha mentioned that her kids wanted to be one of the Mujahideen. This was the key role of women in such a network, to create more Mujahideen. After living her initial life in Ireland, Samantha went to Aylesbury, England when she was 11 years old. They had a normal life in a small British town and had a Muslim best friend there. Then she converted to Islam, and that was the turning point of her life. Now, back to Kenya. On 11 September 2013, news flashed that Westgate Shopping Mall in Nairobi had been under attack. It was an Al-Shabaab attack. 4 suicide gunmen entered the mall from 2 directions and opened fire on all the people. They also threw grenades at them. In that attack, 61 civilians and 6 security guards lost their lives, according to the government statement. The intelligence agencies said 1 British woman and 3 other American men were involved in the attack. An international arrest warrant was published against Samantha, and she became the world's most wanted.
Interpol's looking for her. The CIA, MI5, MI6, they're all looking for her.
Samantha crossed the Kenya-Somalia border many times, because with the right connections, one can easily cross it without going to the police checkpoint and directly to the Al-Shabaab territory, which was Samantha's safe place. Zakia Hussein, deputy chief of Somali police, is especially after her, and that's why she always remains the target. Zakia says Samantha is like any other mafia boss. Her interest is only in popularity and momentary benefits, which she covers in the name of the religion. Samantha could not stay in one place, and her movement near the Kenyan-Somalian border was tracked many a time, but she couldn't get arrested. Samantha is still at large. A few things that hinder Somalian agencies in arrest are: 1, she lives in Al-Shabaab territory, and Somalia lacks operational capabilities to enter it. And 2nd, she is a British citizen, and British law does not make any kind of assassination. They focus on arresting the culprit, then killing it. However, British agencies argue that reaching her could bring a lot of civilian casualties, and they're trying to avoid it, so they're focusing on only tracking her locations. As of now, Samantha is not arrested. Her current location also cannot be confirmed, but security agencies vow to catch her one day. That's it for now. We'll meet again next time with another thrilling real-life story.